Welcome to the Instagram stories for Monday, August 19th. I'm your host, Daniel Hill. We're going to dive into the Mosseri Monday clips, don't worry, but first, let's talk about some Threads news. Meta has announced a range of new features for Threads, bringing it more in line with other social media platforms in terms of analytics, post creation, and more. I will link to a very long blog post about this, but first, let's get into the highlights. Threads analytics are now available, and if you use your desktop or your laptop to access Threads, you can now see a display of key performance metrics for your accounts. I will link to the article with screenshots, but it includes seeing view counts, interaction insights, overall like, reply, repost, and quote counts, a follower growth chart, and audience demographics. So if you want a better feel for how your account and content is performing overall, you're definitely going to want to be familiar with these analytics. Additionally, Threads is rolling out native post scheduling, so you can manage your Threads presence for whatever time you want your posts to be live. There's a quote from Meta: "Content planning helps creators and businesses maintain a consistent online presence. Our new scheduling feature will help with this process by allowing you to create Threads posts and schedule them to publish at a later date and time. You can schedule multiple posts a day, multiple days in advance." End quote. Now, obviously, you could do this with third-party tools. I talk extensively about the Buffer integration with Threads. I even featured an interview with Amanda Marachko, who worked on the Threads team at Buffer in order to make all of that wonderful goodness possible. But it's nice to know that you can do it natively within Threads if you didn't want to use a third-party scheduling app. The Threads team has also expanded post drafts. You could create a post draft previously. Back since March, you've been able to do this, but that only allowed for one draft post at a time inside Threads. What if you wanted to collect multiple ideas as you planned out your content? Well, now you can save up to 100 draft posts inside Threads. You can have them for as long as you want, and they're accessible for posting at any time. I do think it's important to take a minute and just step back and think about Threads as a whole in the social media landscape. It's true, Twitter and X is still being used by a lot of people. But interestingly, the socialmediatoday.com article that I was looking at with all these Threads changes mentioned that of all the content that's on Twitter or X, the content on there is generated by 20% of its audience. The other 80% of Twitter or X users use the app only in read mode, never posting themselves or engaging in any kind of way. That means that if you put this into perspective, X has 250 million daily active users. So in order to have a sizable shift of those X content creators from Twitter to Threads, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of the users. You just need a significant amount of the ones who are actually creating that content. If there are 250 million daily active users on X, Threads only needs to get about 50 million active posters to completely flip the scale. I think that's a really interesting way to think about the differences between the platforms and potentially how easy it is for Threads to reach that tipping point where it becomes more popular. Again, check out links for everything I'm mentioning here in the show notes. Okay, let's quickly jump to the Mosseri Monday questions. And since we're already talking about Threads, let's start with a Threads question. The question: how's Threads doing and when will you consider it a success?
Threads is doing really well. It's growing quickly, engagement is growing, it's growing around the world, but there's a long, long way to go. 200 million users is amazing. That's monthly actives, but it'd be great to get bigger than X. It'd be great to one day reach 1 billion users, though that might take years. And in terms of engagement, it's growing really quickly, but there's still a lot more room to improve compared to other major social apps. So we want to be the best place to share ideas that bring people together, and I think we're on a good trajectory, but there's lots of work to do.
Okay, let's go on to a question where I do not care about the answer at all. Would love to be able to customize the order of my story highlights. You know what I truly am not interested in? Story highlights. I just don't think that they add much value to things, and I think people update them once every 5 years and then never think about them again. I don't think I've ever clicked on a story highlight, and I certainly don't have them on my own account because I just don't like them.
I think that's a good idea. I'm also interested in if there's some sort of way that we can consolidate your grid, which you can curate, and your story highlights, which you can also curate. So maybe there's some way we can allow you to customize all of it. I don't know. I'll talk to the team.
Just delete the whole concept of story highlights and let everyone move on with their lives. That's my thought. Okay, we're going to do one more question before we go to a break. It's not a question as much as a statement. Love 20 carousel. Thank you. This person is referring to the fact that Instagram carousels, sometimes called photo dumps, now support up to 20 photos, which in my opinion is still too many.
Glad you like it. There's no perfect number here, but I do think limits are useful, and I'm really enjoying having a little bit more room to play with. 10 was a little tight.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about whether or not the Instagram algorithm will change this year. And good news, Instagram is looking into a way to no longer have square photos on the profile grid and instead support portrait photos, which would be much better for everyone. So stick around. Oh, hey, welcome back. One thing that has come out recently is that Instagram is testing a way to have portrait photos in the profile grid. Right now, the profile grid has only square photos. And if you add a cover image to a reel, and that cover image is, for instance, portrait, vertical photo, it will only show the center of the image on your profile grid, which is, honestly, it's a whole mess. It really does need to be updated. The question, can we please keep the square grid? This person has probably worked very hard to curate their profile grid to look a certain way. Maybe they set up carousels or made a large grid of images and they cut them up using a specific app or Photoshop or whatever. And therefore they don't want to change to a different kind of profile grid that would show more of the images. Here's Adam's answer to this question.
We are actually testing a vertical grid for those of you who haven't seen it yet for your profile instead of squares. Now, squares are from way back in the day when you could only upload square photos to Instagram. And I know this could be annoying for some of you who really spend a lot of time curating and making sure everything lines up, but I would really like to do better by the content today. And the vast majority of what is uploaded to Instagram today is vertical. It's either 4:3 in a photo or 9:16 in a video. And cropping it down to square is pretty brutal. So I'm hoping we can figure out a way to manage this transition.
I actually very much want that change and think it's a fantastic idea. The next question, will there be another algorithm change this year? If you listen to this show, you know it's not a thing where Instagram sets new parameters of the algorithm to go live on August 1st or September 1st or January 1st or anything like that. They're constantly tweaking the algorithm and the way things work to surface the content that it thinks you should be seeing. Here's Adam's answer to the question, will there be another algorithm change this year?
The way ranking actually changes is it's rare that there's a big change all at once. There's just tiny little changes almost every day. So if you see something change in how your content does, it's probably not because there was a big ranking change. If you see it all of a sudden, it's probably something else. Maybe there's a big event that day. Maybe your account got caught up in some safety measure, which you can check in account status. Maybe it just was a dud of a piece of content. Who knows? But the way ranking changes is usually very slowly but continuously, which is, I think, not quite how people think about it.
And the last question we're going to talk about today, I'm struggling to make money on Instagram as a creator. Where should I start? If you listen to this show regularly, you know I talk about this topic a lot. I have a great answer to this question, but first I'm going to let Adam give his answer.
If you're a smaller creator, I think it's good to experiment with monetization early, but I wouldn't focus on it yet. I'd focus on it more once you're larger and you have a bigger audience that you can monetize. The most common way people monetize on Instagram is actually not from Instagram directly. It's through branded content deals. So pick a brand that aligns with your values, your identity that you believe in, and you can see if there's opportunities to work with them. If you are creating content, though, that you think a subset of your followers are willing to actually pay for, then I love the idea of subscriptions because they're very predictable and consistent revenue, and you're not going to be subject to the volatility that comes along with attaching your revenue to reach.
Adam mentioned brand partnerships there, and I think that is absolutely the best way to get started. If you are unfamiliar with the concept, brands are paying you to create content for them. If you're not sure how to get started, I did an interview recently with Kristen Bousquet. She is a creator monetization coach, and she has an anti-pitch strategy of partnering with brands. I will link to this interview in the show notes so that you can listen if you haven't had a chance. That is going to do it for today's episode. Be sure to come back next time for more social media news, strategy, and other things that I am positive that you absolutely need to know. And as always, look for links to everything I mentioned in the show notes.
I'm not yet a member of the Instagram team, but my podcast covers many Instagram themes. But the name, image, logos are trademarks of Instagram and the LCC in the USA and every territory. Everything I publish independently until Zuck returns my DMs and starts to pay my salary. Not sponsored or endorsed, no lies, no fallacies. I use their logo with permission, not malicious or callously. No trademark violation, filling all criteria. Follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Daniel Hill Media.